Hello, hello, hello. This is part two. God had one covenant since Genesis. My purpose is to agree with the word. So, in part two, we're going to look at God calls this thing my covenant, and that's what we're seeing. The first episode of this, I showed where Noah, he said, my covenant, right? And then here in Abraham, he says the same thing, my covenant. So, and I think we're looking at a different side of the mountain at this. And I'm not disagreeing, obviously, that there were Noahic covenant, Abrahamic, Mosaic, but I'm seeing that maybe God, in His mind, had one covenant with humanity, and that's to bring salvation. That's His covenant. So we established that with Genesis, right after humanity failed, Adam and Eve, and the Satan was involved, the serpent. God lays out His plan from the beginning in Genesis, and He says, um, he says in Genesis 3:15, and I will make enemies of you and the woman, and of your offspring and her descendant. He shall bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise him on the heel. So he lays out, that's his covenant, that's his plan, to eradicate Satan and to bring salvation to mankind. So he's working through the history of humanity to reveal this covenant. Now, we fail the covenant. You know, we've seen Israel fail. But what I want to establish is the term my covenant. And so I see that God had one covenant, one purpose in mind, and that's you. So the Abrahamic covenant is God revealing that in that generation. And he says to Abraham, Genesis 17, chapter 2, verse 2, 17, verse 2, I will make my covenant. There's the word. I will make my covenant between me and you, and I will multiply you exceedingly. If you notice, God is saying, I will do, I will do. My covenant is I will do. So, as I said in the first episode, it seems God reveals more of himself in heaven through each covenant, right? In Noah, there was a sign given, which was the rainbow. The rainbow in Book of Revelation wraps around God's throne, and he reveals a little heaven. Here, he, like Noahic covenant, he gives Abraham the covenant of circumcision. Oh, this is good stuff. Remember, a covenant is a partnership. Both sides play a role. So with this covenant, what he plans to do is, I made some notes here. His plan is to, he promises an enormous family that will inherit the land to Abraham, a land in Canaan, so that he could bring about universal blessing to all humanity. So God reveals heaven again with this sign of uncircumcision. The purpose of that, this is what he's revealing, is to sanctify. That means set apart for a purpose. He sanctifies Abraham and his offspring away from the rest of humanity for the purpose of bringing, quote unquote, my covenant to humanity, right? So Abraham and his descendants, that their future is in and fertility is in God's hands. Okay, that's what the uncircumcision shows, that in Abraham's family descendants, their future and their fertility is in the hands of God. Why do I say fertility? Jesus. My covenant was to reveal Jesus. That's what I believe God was trying to say. He did say, and to the woman, to Adam and Eve, in that conversation in the garden was what? Her descendant. So God is revealing this through history. One covenant, man. Now, my purpose is to bring faith and to agree with the word. So Abraham is told to leave the land of Canaan, because in the covenant there is what's the word I put? I don't want to say circumstantial. It's both play a role. God and man play a role. It's conditional and unconditional. That's the word. God's part is unconditional. Man's part is conditional. The condition was to circumcise, and then he told Abraham to leave for the new land he promised and to train his family to live right, practice this circumcision. So this is a conditional, unconditional covenant. God and Abraham have both parts to play. God always keeps his part. He plans to bless the world. That's my covenant. God's saying my covenant. So I like this. Looking at this, because now as I read through the Old Testament, I'm seeing that it's one covenant and he's revealing himself through each generation. And here's an example. Man, this is good. So when I jump to Matthew 9, this is the cool stuff that I get. We know Jesus, God's plan is Jesus, right? God in the flesh. God merging humanity to the Trinity to bring salvation. That's good stuff. And all he's asked all along the way was the condition of be willing. Are you willing? Noah was willing to believe. And the condition was you shall be saved if you do this. God does his part. Now at Abraham, you and all of your descendants said no, it was just his present descendant. But Abraham, it's now Abraham and all of his descendants. The condition is do these things. God says, I will do my part. He even says that. He says, I am your shield. Told Abraham that I am your protector. Man, that's good. So, but when you see Jesus show up, okay, this is the last thing I want to tell you. When Jesus shows up, read Matthew 9. This is cool. Remember the paralyzed man they bring down? He just wanted healing, but the covenant God had with humanity, he's always revealing himself. He said this, Matthew 9:2. And seeing their faith, Jesus said to the man who was paralyzed, take courage, son. Your sins are forgiven. He called him a son. This is before the cross. He said, you are a son and your sins are forgiven before he died. And so they have this long conversation where that upsets the people. But jump on down to verse 9, chapter 9, verse 6 of Matthew. Jesus says, but so that you know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins, he said to the paralyzed man, get up, pick your stretcher, and go home. The Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. This is before the cross. Why? God is above space, time, and matter because God created space, time, and matter. So Jesus shows up to say, I'm here to forgive you. Now, my intention with this is to bring hope as I close this down. God's plan. Sin was the cancer for humanity starting in the garden. God knew it because death now passes to all man because of that sin. But he established his covenant at the beginning and says, I have a covenant. And her descendant, which will be Jesus, is going to crush Satan. Satan is the problem. There's a problem. There's a lot of conversation about that. We are being saved from Satan and his kingdom. We are being delivered from sin, and God promises a perfect world one day where there is no Satan and there is no sin, where we can live with God forever, and that is his covenant, a salvation for mankind. The condition is just agree with God, believe with him and his covenant. That's our conditional side. So that's hope. It's not religious. That's truth. Jesus is the pinnacle of that covenant. Good news. I'm going to keep discussing this. So when you look back It's a different perspective, but I'm not trying to purposefully do a different perspective. I'm trying to be as truthful with the word as I can, and try to understand better what God is doing through the whole gospel, through the whole Bible. Anyway, like and share. I'm Pastor Aaron of Grace and Truth Church in Dunbar. You're welcome to join us 10 o'clock Sundays. Just like